Good morning and welcome to the Say Yes Movement podcast, usually with Heather and John, but today it's just John. How is everybody doing? I just wanted to let everyone know. Unfortunately, Heather won't be with us today. She is somewhere over in the skies, flying over to Nova Scotia for an obligation. So it's just me today. And I'm so happy to be here with all of you to talk about, saying yes to life, saying yes to all the stuff that make life worthwhile. One of the things we do on Friday is celebrations, and I love celebrations because it's an opportunity to really highlight, the wins for the week, the things that are we doing well, and the things that really take us to that next level. And I want to hear your celebration. So today is Friday, Celebration Friday. And, one of the things I'm celebrating this week is the power of consistency, staying consistent, but also, just knowing that, I have control over certain things in life. The one thing that's been a big topic of conversation, especially in my coaching conversations that I've been having with individuals, has really been around control. Like, what's in your control? What can you do? What can you really elevate to that next level? Regardless of what's happening in the environment around you. And sometimes you need to change environment. That's one of the things that you have control over. And one thing I recognized this week is the different aspects of life that I have control over. And I'm celebrating that. There's an awareness that comes with knowing, and when you know certain things, you can do certain things. So that's what I love. This week, for our conversation today, the one thing I want to share with all of you is I went to an event this past Tuesday, and I got to see this amazing speaker. His name is David T.S. Wood, and he was talking about the four enemies. And, one of the things that David does, he's a global trainer. He goes around the world. He talks to different folks. And he realized that there are common things that are affecting all of us in life. And, for him, one of the things that he looked at are what are the biggest challenges that are facing individuals right now, regardless of culture, regardless of location, regardless of where you are. And, he calls it the four enemies. And the four enemies are this, and I'm going to go through this because I thought it was incredibly insightful in terms of what he shared and, the impact that it's having on our lives right now. And I thought it was incredibly timely because, the truth is this is affecting all of us. So the four enemies that he spoke to, one was the wellness gap. One was the cost of living crisis that we're facing right now. And I'll dive into that in a little bit. And then the loneliness epidemic, and then finally the happiness decline. Now, I don't know if any one of those four resonate with you, but talking about control and things that we have control over, I started to realize in these four enemies, these four areas, what are the areas that I can manage? What are the areas that I can control? What are the areas where I can excel? And, when he talked about the wellness gap was really around just our health, in terms of what we're doing. And one of the biggest things that was found in research is, we're not necessarily consuming the best foods, or we're not getting the nutrients that we need into our body. And it's interesting because he talked about something called the blue zones. And there's a great movie or TV series on, I believe it's Netflix, that talks about the blue zones. And the blue zones are areas in the world where people have incredibly long life lifespans, longevity, and they also have incredible, like, they're not just living longer, but they're also healthier, they're mobile. And what they found was, a big part of this longevity, these blue zones, was wellness. And wellness came down to nutrition and food, what you're putting into your mouth, what you're putting into your body, and making sure that that food is good and that it's nutrient rich. Things like moringa, things like adaptogens, things that help manage our body and, really fuel our body in a really positive way. And then the other thing that he started to look at in these blue zones is movement. It doesn't matter where you are in any of these blue zones. It doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 50, or 100, which some of these people have life expectancy way past 100. Movement is a big part of that. And, for me personally, I know movement has been a key for me in terms of just getting myself to a place where I feel strong and I feel positive and I feel empowered. Movement's so important. One of the things I work into my 30-day reset, which is my community, um, is movement. And when I talk about movement, I'm not talking about going to the gym and pumping weights. If that's what you want to do, that's fantastic. I'm not talking about training in the pool or doing triathlons or anything like that. Movement is just moving. And one of the greatest successes for me over the last 2.5 years was acknowledging that at the end of 2021 I needed to move, or at the end of 2021 I needed to move more in my life. I felt like a couch potato just coming off the pandemic, and I just needed to move. So I created this challenge where I just moved for 31 minutes for 31 days. And what that really consisted of was just going for walks. And, this is something, barring any sort of limitations in your mobility, but walking is something that we can all do. Almost all of us can do that. And, I just started with that. Start simple. When it comes to wellness, when it comes to health, what are the small changes that you can make today that are going to move you forward? And at the beginning of 2021, the change was just going for a walk. Or at the end of 2021, at the start of 2022, was just going for a walk. And it just shifted, right? Like the thing is, one of the things I've been talking about this week too is really around building momentum and how do we get our bodies into a really positive state. And managing and changing our physiology is one of the ways that we do that. One of the things Tony Robbins talks about quite a lot, and so does Amy Cuddy. When we change our physiology, we change our psychology. And when you're doing that, you're creating a new way of being. You're creating a new state. You're creating that wellness state, right? For those that just joined, I'm talking about something I picked up this past week, which is the 4 enemies. And I'm talking about the wellness gap and how we can start controlling what happens from a health and wellness perspective. And wellness isn't just physical health, it's also mental health. A lot of times, just taking the time to acknowledge the wins, the celebrations that we have. And it's part of the reason why Heather and I incorporate the celebrations into our podcast every Friday, because it's an opportunity to acknowledge how you're moving forward, how you're growing, how you're excelling, because we don't do that enough. And a lot of times where I'm working with clients, I'll ask them, what are you celebrating this week? What are you celebrating this month? And they'll be like, what do you mean? Where have you made progress? Where have you started to move forward in a positive direction? And they're like, what do you mean? They can highlight all the things that aren't going well. And, acknowledging and seeing your wins, for me personally, and for some of the clients I work with, has been a huge game changer, right? Because now you can see how you're progressing and you're moving forward. So the wellness gap is really around managing your physical and your mental health, and making sure that you take care of that. And for those that are just joining, I'm talking about the 4 enemies. I was watching a speaker this week. His name is David T.S. Wood, and he talks about the 4 enemies. And the first one was the wellness gap, and how, globally, this is a global issue where a lot of people are affected by just overall health from a wellness perspective. And that's part nutrition, that's part movement. And, he talks about some other things in and around just feeling that sense of belonging to a group. The other thing he talked about was the cost of living crisis. I don't know about you, but in North America, I don't know where you're located in the world, but we're kind of suffering this a little bit, right? Like there's shrinkflation, I think is what they call it, where people are paying more for less. And I saw it last night. I ordered some dinner, and normally we get these overloaded portions, with our meals. And yesterday it was just half. I'm not gonna highlight who it was, but I was like, oh my gosh, like what happened? Like, and I know things are getting more expensive. Things are just getting more expensive, right? And how do you manage that? How do you work through that? And, this is something that's affecting the world globally, right? Like the cost of living crisis is something that's impacting. Actually, he went to 24 different countries. He did the survey, and it's affecting everybody. So how do we take care of that? How do we look at ways of being more efficient with our spend, our money? How do we make sure that we create sources of revenue? And some of the people I talk to, a lot of people I talk to actually are looking at second and even third sources of income, just to get by day to day. And going back to what I talked about at the beginning, when we talk about having control, there's things that we can manage. And, one of the things that potentially that was brought up in conversation was, you know, when was the last time you looked at your spend? When was the last time you looked at everything that you're doing? Yeah, eat, sleep, exercise, movement are all the three key to health. We all have control over these things. Yeah, absolutely, Nicole. Thank you for joining in. Don't forget to drop in your celebration this week, Nicole. I'd love to see that. Yeah, no, it is something that we have control over. And, just going back to the cost of living crisis, when was the last time you looked at your subscriptions? You know, one of the exercises I went through at the beginning of the year this year was, what am I subscribed to? And do I really need all these subscriptions? And it was crazy to look at, how could I start managing some of these things? And, just taking the time to reflect and to look at it and to see where you can actually start making some changes. Uh, and, there are things in our life too, even from a wellness perspective, um, when we talk about food and nutrition, a big part of that is, how do we make sure that we're still putting in the right things into our body so we can get that longevity, so we can get that energy, so we can keep moving forward in a really good way. And that's all tied in with the cost of living crisis. And he provided a couple of different solutions, which I thought was interesting. And if you want to know more, just reach out. The other thing he talked about was the loneliness epidemic, and coming out of the pandemic. And I can't believe we're still saying this in 2024. But coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot of people are still feeling the sense of loneliness. And part of the reason Heather and we do this podcast is an opportunity for us to connect with all of you, to share insights that we're going through and, just experiences that we're having. But it's also to create that sense of connection. Good morning, Nicole. Yeah. And, there's one of the things I've incorporated as part of my, 30-day reset program was reaching out to people. One of the things we do every Tuesday is we do something called gratitude drops. And I know Heather and we've talked about that before. But gratitude drops are just an opportunity to share with some people, the impact that they're having on you. Some people, and I've seen this, just talking to different individuals, it's like, they're like, well, nobody's thinking about me, or nobody cares about me, or nobody really cares. Right. And I hear about this in the workplace too, right? And when I'm working with different clients, they're like, I don't think my boss really cares about me. And, and I think that's interesting that somebody would say that when, they work in an organization of, 20, 30, 40, 50, even 60,000 people, and nobody's thinking about them. So part of, just talking about what I mentioned earlier, taking that control, making yourself visible, incorporating yourself into things. There's one thing to sit on the sidelines and just kind of watch life happen, or you can jump into the arena and start participating. And, the loneliness epidemic is really around, hey, let's acknowledge the people around us, let them know how we're what we're thinking about them, and actually just letting them know the impact that they're having on us. And what I love about gratitude drops is so simple. Gratitude drops is, you just send a message, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this. And I know this is something I actually even picked up from Heather was, if somebody pops into your mind, just send them a note and say hello. Say, hey, I was thinking about you. I just wanted to let you know the impact that you were having on me, how you've really been impactful in my life. And sometimes the start of that conversation leads into a much bigger conversation. And it just lets people know that, they're loved, right? And, I know it sounds a little funny when I'm like, wait a minute, you want to let people know they're loved? Yeah, absolutely. Let people know that they're loved, they're thought about, that they're important, and you're happy that they're here with us. Nicole, love your celebration. I'm celebrating, recognizing our best of the best tonight. Woohoo! Great opportunity to enjoy time together outside of workplace while acknowledging effort and excellence. Listen, I love that. I love that you're doing that with your team. I love that you're taking the time to acknowledge, the work and effort that everybody's putting in their day to day. And that breaks down. I'm so happy you brought that up, because that breaks down the loneliness epidemic, right? Just letting people know their impact, letting people know what kind of change and effect that they're having on the world, even if it's in your corporate world, right? Like, it's just, there's something to be said about people knowing that they're important and that they matter, right? And I love that, because my good friend Inkachi, you matter. She's got this whole keynote speech around you matter. And it's so important to recognize that you do matter, that we're all contributing in one way or another. Nicole, I love that you're taking the time to acknowledge your team for that. Okay, so going down the list of the 4 enemies. So I've talked about the wellness gap. I talked about the cost of living crisis, the loneliness epidemic, and the final one that he talked about is the happiness decline. And the happiness decline, again, these are global issues that are impacting people around the world. And in his happiness decline, one of the things he talked about is people are feeling less and less happy, less and less fulfilled, less and less inspired and motivated, and it's causing, and we're starting to see this because there's medication for this advertised all over television and the internet around forget the medication name, but people suffering from depression and they're taking antidepressants, that's it, and how they're suffering. And happiness, a lot of times we think it comes from the outside. And one of the things I learned from Tony Robbins and even Robin Sharma, one of my mentors and coaches in this area, happiness is something that comes from within. When I talked about gratitude earlier, and actually even this morning as I was coming back from the pool, and I was sitting in my car and I'm like, what am I going to listen to? I can listen to the radio, or I can listen to a gratitude meditation, like not one that puts you to sleep or one that you need to close your eyes for, but just listening to gratitude and expressing gratitude. And it was funny because as I was thinking about things I was grateful for, a friend of mine sent me a message and he's like, hey man, I just wanted to say hi. And I'm like, wow, it's like there's a connection that happens, right? And a big part of happiness is being part of community, being part of a group, being part of, going back to community, being part of something, and what I love about, some of the things that I do, and even Heather, is we're always looking for great community, right? We're always looking for people around us. But the one thing that we're always mindful of are the people in that community. Are they aligned in our values? Are they aligned in the way we think? Are they aligned? Are they positive, right? Like, and that part is so important because that will depend, on how happy you actually feel. And I've seen this, right? Like in different coaching conversations I've been having over the last couple of weeks is, we're constantly being influenced by the people around us. The question is, are we being influenced in a positive way or in a negative way? And for the most part, it starts to really impact a lot of how we start to see the world, right? If somebody says, oh, this person is such and such, and, this person is not a good person. And, and I'm like, how do you know that's even true if you've never even talked to the person? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, well, do you know that it's true? Or is that just somebody's opinion of somebody else, right? Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Felicia. Yeah, good morning, Felicia. So happy to have you here. A lot of people are sad. Yeah, a lot of people are sad and despondent. And, we have to be really mindful of what we're putting in here. What are we filling up our cup with, right? And if you fill up your cup with dirty water, you're just going to get dirty thoughts. Anyways, I'll just leave that one there. But if you fill up your cup with dirty water, you're going to get dirty thoughts. And, if you fill up your cup with positive, inspiring, and, just really strong, positive messaging every day, that's going to fill up your cup in a really positive way. And that's, that to me is incredibly important. What are you putting in here? What are you constantly, yes, we talked about the wellness gap, what we're putting into our bodies, but what else are we also putting into our minds? Because our minds are sponges, and I don't care how old you are, you're still absorbing stuff. The question is, do you want to absorb something that empowers and just strengthens you, or do you want something that just takes away and drains your energy? And I think my answer, right? My answer is really around, incorporating things that really empower us in a really powerful way. And what I love about the community, what we have here with the Say Yes, with Nicole and Felicia and everybody else that joins from time to time, you are an inspiration to all of us. Listen, you are here with me. It's 8 a.m. I'm by myself. Heather's not with me today, but you're still here. You're still part of the community, and I love that. Felicia, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, good stuff in, good stuff out. I love it. So we can manage, we have control over those things. And, if there's one thing I want to invite you to take away as part of this call today, this podcast is to really think about, what do you have control over? What can you, maybe if you look back at this past week, if there were moments that were really difficult and challenging for you, what were the things that you might have been able to do a little bit differently, knowing that you have control, right? And just taking it, and I've been reflecting on that, especially as I've been going into my Friday. One of the things I do on Thursday is take a moment to reflect, is to really reflect on the week. So your takeaway for today, and I know this is typically what Heather assigns to all of you as part of the action, is to really think about, where are you in control and what can you control. And there might be areas today where you feel like you're not in control, and just know that there are aspects of that you can't control. And thank you for listening to this week's Say Yes Movement podcast. Just remember, when you shift your mindset, you shift your life. Wishing you all a fabulous week. Talk to you all soon.